Hey everyone, it's Adam from the Army Painter. I'm back again with another Zombicide second edition paint set tutorial. We are going back and revisiting the Fill the Cop model. In our last video, we did a tabletop-ready tutorial where we showed you how to apply your base coats and a very simple wash to bring out some of the details on the model. Get it ready for your next Zombicide second edition game. Today we're going to take it a step further. We're going to show you some more advanced masterclass techniques. We're going to apply some highlights and some fine highlights to really impress your gaming friends. Let's take a look at the paints that we're going to be using in today's tutorial. Now that you've grabbed your paints and hopefully you got your favorite brush, mine right now, and I think I'm going to be using this most of this tutorial, is our character brush from our Wargamer brush range. Grab yourself some clean rinsing water, a paper towel, and a wet palette because you know that I love to use mine, and let's get started. To begin, I'm going to start by applying a initial highlight to all of the flesh tones on the model. So I'm going back to my Survivor skin, and I'm just going to apply this to the most raised edges, leaving that flesh wash that we applied in our first tutorial to sit untouched, unbothered in the recesses. And this is really going to bring out the definition and the details on this model. So very carefully here, again, I'm using my character brush because this is kind of an in-between from a detail brush, and actually it's definitely in between a detail brush and our regiment brush. It holds a fine tip, but still holds quite a bit of paint. So just find the raised areas. I'm going to come back to this forearm on Fill the Cop in a bit, but right now I'm going to focus in on some of the highlights and details that we have here on the face of the model. So he's got this big broad chin, so we definitely want to pick that out. We're going to pick out the bridge of the nose, of course, and then we'll find the raised areas like his cheekbone here and just begin to highlight these areas to really push the vibrance of the color on the model. After you apply a wash, it does tend to darken it down quite a bit. So coming back with this first pass highlight will really help to reinvigorate those base tones that we applied at the very beginning of this tutorial. I've taken a little bit of Abomination skin and mixed it in with our Survivor skin to start picking out our first real highlight. And I'm just going to focus this on the raised edges and areas that the model gives us, like the tip of the elbow and the pitches on the musculature on this model. And I'm not applying so much as an edge highlight or a fine highlight. I'm just taking my brush and moving it back and forth across the raised areas just to add some texture to these areas and slowly build up that highlight as opposed to creating a harsh line highlight. So similarly, I'll apply the same to the face. So I'm going to apply this to the bottom of the chin. I went a little bit overboard there. It's okay. Our paints are still a little bit wet, so you can just move it away. And alternatively, you can just go ahead to your palette and just mix in, we still have a little bit of that dirt spatter from the last tutorial just to reinforce where that wash recess shadow was, and just to essentially just redo it. We're just fixing our mistakes as we go. Now, I always say in painting there are no mistakes, just happy little accidents. And that's true, because you could always paint over what you previously painted. So I'm going to take some of that 50-50 mix. I'm going to apply it to the most outer tips of the fingers on the model, like so. And I'll find the rest of the flesh tones. So here, this forearm muscle that he has, I'm just going to start blending that 50-50 mixture into the plain Survivor skin to give some realistic pitch and shading on the model. Now with pure Abomination skin, we're just going to find some of the most highest points of these highlights. In some cases, we're just going to add a little line and then feather back just to make a nice realistic highlight. But what we're really doing is we're just trying to pick out the hot spots, the bright spots on these flesh tones where the light would hit most. You don't have to go too crazy with any, line or edge highlights. We're just going to work these in fairly naturally with the paintbrush. Of course, we'll just add a little dab to maybe the top couple fingers there, just to really make them stand out. And here again on this forearm muscle seems to be a good spot on this character to pull that highlight. There we go. Get this elbow back up the back of the muscle. And we're almost done. I might just add a little bit to this side of the muscle, maybe just a simple line like so. There we go. Now we're talking. And just carefully around the areas on the face, like the tip of the nose, the tip of the ears, and that'll about call it a day for all of the skin tones. I've got my character brush and I've got a little bit of zombie skin, which is a 100% color match to skeleton bone from the Army Painter War Paints range, and I'm just going to use this to apply my first highlight, basically reestablishing the base tones, leaving the wash in the recesses on all of Phil the Cop's uniform, the sleeves here, letting the wash be a guide as to where to focus these highlights and where to leave some of the paint in the recesses. So I'm working with thin down paint here just for added control. You can see just by comparison this side to this side how much that color really starts to pop and how much more vibrant it is because of this just very simple highlight. So I'm going around the areas on the model that we painted in this zombie skin and just reestablishing that base tone, really bringing that first highlight to life. I've mixed in a little bit of pale white to our zombie skin, and I'm just going to keep going on with these highlights, just blending them back nice and simply, just finding the ridges and the raised areas just to add some simple gradation to this part of the model. I have thinned down the paints quite a bit on my palette just to make them super workable here. Don't want to forget the tip of the bat here, the wrap that he has around it. On the areas like here on the sleeves, I'm just going to focus on the uppermost areas like here, blending that into the ridges, because this is where the sunlight would most likely catch these areas, like so. Now just a little bit more of our pale white mixed in. I'm just going to pick out a couple of the corners and most raised areas just to really push this color point on the model. So areas like here around the sleeve, this is a good example. He's got this little piece up here, just going to put one right there on the corner and along the edges. Then we're going to hit the tips of the collars. He's got a little bit of his uniform poking out from underneath his tactical vest. So apply a little bit of a highlight there. And I'll just add a couple dabs of this mixture, this almost white, to the cloth on the bat handle there. Just very simply. The areas here on the back, he's got a nice strong ridge there, fold in the clothing. So I add a couple simple highlights like that. Now we're going to move on to highlighting up all of the brown on the model, including his pants. So I'm just taking a bit of dirt spatter and I'm going to reestablish some of the base tone, again, while leaving the wash in the shadows and the recesses, allowing it to do its job. On areas like here, just give me a second to turn this model around. I'm just going to pick out some of the raised areas on that strap there and just go around and find some interesting points. Allow that wash to kind of guide me. You can see where it's settled into the recesses, and that's my indication. That's the outside lines. It's telling me to color inside of them. So I'm just going to apply a couple simple coats here, working pretty quickly. Again, I'm using my regiment brush for this one. Actually, I'm using my character brush, but you could use your regiment brush for this level because it is somewhat larger and less detailed area on the model. And go ahead and just apply that dirt spatter and just pick out that first highlight around the model. Now you'll remember that we used a mixture of this color, this dirt spatter, and I believe. Remember, we used a combination of the dirt spatter and Wanda Blonde on the baseball bat, and I'm going to do the same thing. Just apply a very simple highlight, letting the wash stay in the recesses on the bat like so. I've mixed a little bit of our zombie skin, which is again 100% color match to our skeleton bone from the Army Painter War Paints range. And I'm just going to start working this initial highlight into all of the brown areas on the model. And this isn't an edge highlight, this is just a feathered in, a layered in highlight. We're just picking in and blocking in the areas that we want to appear lighter with this mixture. We'll also use this on the strap that he has here and his hair. Now when painting in the hair, what I'm going to recommend that you do is use the side of your brush as much as you can to pick out some of these detailed ridges. And where you can't, just be very careful with your application of this highlight. You just want to pick out some of the raised areas on the hair like so. So go around the model. Some of the other areas that you're going to want to highlight are the gun that he has on his back, like so, the butt of the gun. We're just working this subtle highlight in to the original application of dirt spatter. Now, because we're using a wet palette, if you did get a little bit too heavy-handed there, you could always go back to the dirt spatter and blend it back in, just very simply. It's one of the beauties of working with a wet palette when you're painting your models. Preserves those paints all throughout the duration of your project. So I'm just going to go around the model, find all of the brown parts of the model, and just apply a very simple highlight. Not putting too much thought into where it goes, just finding the raised areas to add some nice visual interest to this model. Very similarly, I mixed in a little bit of skeleton bone to our bat mixture here, and I'm just going to apply a little bit, just very sparingly on the bat. Now, on the back side of the bat, there's actually some definition and some nice ridges and detail to illustrate that this is a wooden bat that's been used to smash probably hundreds, if not thousands, of zombie skulls. So I'm going to trace in some of those lines with this color here. And in the other areas, I'm just going to use it to, pull some nice feathered highlights and blends. We can push those highlights even further by just adding a little bit more of that zombie skin into both of the color mixtures we've been working with here. So for instance here on the bat, just like that. And then on the pant legs, I'm going to just load up a little bit more paint on my brush. The most raised areas, these creases on his trousers like so. Just add a very simple highlight. Now he's got this nice pleat down the center of his pants, and we'll just trace a nice simple highlight like that. And go about and find the ridges around the pants with this mixture just to finish it off. And we're getting real close to being finished. We just got a few more highlights that we're going to have to pick off. Phil the cop is going to be ready to go bash some zombie skulls. With all of the skin tones, the khakis, and the browns complete on the model, we only have a few steps left. Now we just have to reestablish and highlight the green tactical vest, as well as all of the blackish gray pieces on the model and metallics. So let's get right to it. I've got a little bit of our moldy clothes on my brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and reestablish some of the base tone here, just very simply. We've got quite a bit of detail on this tactical vest that he's wearing, so we're just going to take our time here and very simply build up that green just to make it a little bit more vibrant. You can see how applying that wash to it really does darken it down quite a bit, and that's okay. We want that, especially in these areas underneath the model where you don't get a lot of light on it to begin with. So we just want to pick out a few of those corners, flip the model around, give yourself a good angle on it to get to some of these harder to reach areas, and just very carefully reestablish that moldy close base tone while leaving some of that wash in the recesses like so. Now here we've got a bigger, flatter panel on the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use more of that brush, not just the tip, and I'm going to reestablish that base tone, leaving some of that wash. You can see I'm pulling the pigment away from the shadowed areas in there, and just apply a very simple base coat. We'll do this all over the green areas on the model until we're happy with the finished product. I've mixed in just a little bit of the Wanda Blonde to really kind of push this to the yellow side of the spectrum. And I'm just going to pick out some of the areas that are pointing out the most and build our initial highlights here and just build a simple gradation. You know, it's just a little speck of this on, say, the corner of this pocket here, and then a few brush strokes will help to kind of give the illusion that there is some gradient happening there. And now here on the back of his vest, I am going to start working in some lines just to define the areas that I want to focus this highlight, and that's going to be on the upper portion of this vest like so, very simply. And I can always go back to our initial moldy clothes and work those two colors in together to get a nice simple gradient like that. And then around the trim here, he's got a nice little fold around the corner. I'll just apply a bit of that like so. If you want to, you could just mix a little bit of our pale white, and for this we'll just go to our detail brush and pick out the hardest corners on the model, the hardest edges and details, really just to define them like so. Not being too precise here, just picking out some of the hard edges. This is a fairly highly detailed model, so just want to find some of those hard edges, apply a couple of those highlights. I'm working with a couple different tones here, so don't make it too hard on yourself, but this is our Masterclass tutorial, so we are trying to push our abilities just a little bit. Hopefully, with just these simple techniques, it will help you to take your painting to that next level. Now, you can see me manipulating the model in my hands, and that's just so I can get a good angle on some of these harder to reach areas with my brush. So just like so, I've thinned down my paint with a bit of water. I'm using my detail brushes. This is going to give me the most control, and when you combine that with the thinned down paints, it gives you supreme control over the brush as you manipulate these highlights on the model. And you can see how small some of these highlights are. Back here I'll just apply maybe one or two dots in a line, but you can see how it's really allowing this green to jump out at you. The other thing, once you start mixing that zombie flesh, and pure white or pale white into these colors here, what it does is it begins to match some of the highlights from the other colors. For example, on the pants with the brown here and the white that we mixed in with our zombie flesh and also the skin tones. So you're establishing a consistent white, a consistent bright point on the model by using the same colors to build up those highlights. I've mixed in some of our filthy suit and dead black, and I'm just going to go ahead and reestablish the base tones that we applied to the areas like the gloves and the gun here, this gun casing, like so. And this, again, you see me, I'm just feathering this in for just a simple gradient on those areas. And we'll apply the same technique similarly to what we did to the rest of the pouches on the model. And then he's got these straps here across his thighs, so we want to hit them just very simply, and of course the shoes on the model. So I'm going to apply this a little bit more liberally to the shoes because we do have some nice definition there. It's got the laces here. Just apply a little bit, almost like a little bit of a dry brush over top of the laces. So go around the rest of the model, find all of the areas that you painted in this gray tone, in this gray mixture. Leave some of that wash in the recesses to keep that definition. Just a few simple steps away from being finished with this Fill the Cop model. Now we'll just take some pure filthy suit and we'll apply some very simple refined highlights to all of the black areas on the model. Remember, when we're painting in blacks and whites as well, we're really not painting with whites and blacks. We're actually painting a lot in the gray area and using gray tones to give the illusion of white and black when we're painting miniatures. And it's much the same fashion here. So I'm going to apply these highlights very simply to the hard edges, much like we did with the green pouches that we had on the tactical vest. Just very simply pulling some simple, quick, and realistic as we can be with this tiny zombie hunting model here. Highlights across the model. So just take your time, find all of the black / gray areas on the model, and go ahead and apply some simple highlights to them, and then we'll come back and we'll finish the model off by highlighting the metallics on the model. Finally, we're just going to take some shotgun metal, aptly named for the first part of this step of the tutorial, the final step of the tutorial, and we're going to use it to highlight all of the metallics, including the shotgun, like so. And then there's some metal pieces around the baseball bat there that he's got hanging off of his hip, his sidearm that he has holstered here, and of course the rifle that he has on his back. Now this would be a good opportunity to find some buckles on the model that you may have missed, to just add a simple dot to some of those areas, like so. It's not at all necessary, but it's a good opportunity to do that if you'd like to. Just highlight those areas now. Especially want to get the trigger of the gun here. And almost the most important part, can't forget Fill the Cop sunglasses. So we just simply base them in our machine gun metal, then gave them a light wash with our dark tone. We're just going to reestablish the highlight there, and that's about it. We're just about done with this guy. Now, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and add a simple wash to present like he has maybe some aftershave going on. You could apply some blue, quick shade blue tone from the War Paints range to the glasses to make them look a little bit more reflective if you want to. Of course, you don't have to, but at least this gets you set up and ready. And with these advanced techniques, you should impress your friends the next time you all get together to play Zombicide 2nd Edition. I really hope that you enjoyed this series of tutorials featuring Phil the Cop and the paints from the Zombicide 2nd Edition paint set. It was really fun bringing this model to life using the paints found inside of this set and this set alone. Thank you for tuning in as I showed you how to finish off and add some more refined and advanced techniques in this Masterclass tutorial. Remember that you're going to be able to get all of the paints and this exclusive miniature inside the Zombicide 2nd Edition paint set real soon. Remember that the magic in miniature painting is that it can be as simple or as challenging as you'd like it to be, but with the right techniques, you're sure to achieve some great results. We'll see you next time.